Good morning and welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where we're here today to talk with researchers and scientists who are excited because they are about to deliver some of their important research to the International Space Station aboard the SpaceX CRS-4 mission that's slated to launch on Saturday morning. I'd like to introduce our folks who are here to talk with you today. To my left is Dwayne Ratliff, the Chief Operating Officer for CASIS. To his left, Mike Yagley, Director of Research and Testing for Cobra Puma Golf. Next, Dr. Eugene Boland, Chief Scientist for Techshot. Jason Gilbert, Scientific Associate for Novartis Institutes for Biomedical Research. And Nikki Werkheiser, Project Manager for 3D Printing in Zero-G. Welcome, everyone. We kind of would like to encourage just an open discussion this morning. We have a number of our news media folks in the room as well as social media attendees for the NASA Social, and just kind of would like to have a dialogue about everything that's going on. And Dwayne, I'm wondering if we could start off with you and just give us a little bit of information about CASIS and the exciting plans you have once we launch the SpaceX Falcon 9 and Dragon this weekend.
Yeah, sure, Mike. Thanks. So this is a great opportunity to be here, and this panel actually really does a great job of representing CASIS and its partnerships and its opportunities to create utilization of the ISS from an R&D perspective. CASIS, as you know, is the nonprofit partner with NASA. In collaboration with NASA, we are engaged in utilizing the International Space Station, the National Laboratory, if you will, as the ideal R&D platform in microgravity low Earth orbit. Our focus really is to utilize ISS for research and development that will have applicability back here on Earth. And so that's kind of the divergence, if you will, from where NASA and CASIS separates. NASA is focusing its efforts on exploration and use of the ISS for that research, whereas CASIS is looking at how the research done on ISS can be beneficial for folks back here on Earth. And so this panel really represents a good example of how we're doing that effort. We have representatives here today that are describing material science research, looking at drug studies in the biotech and life sciences areas, as well as new technology development and enabling technology that will not only help the ISS serve as a better research and development platform, but the information and the knowledge that we gather from that may be helpful in applications that will be derived here on the ground. And of course, with Nikki, she rounds it out representing our NASA collaboration.
Okay. Mike, I wanted to ask you, the idea and the concept of using the ISS for commercial use is not, completely unique, but the idea of sporting goods is very, very interesting, and wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So we've put together an experiment that's going to help us understand how plating in a microgravity environment will potentially improve crystalline growth, adhesion, durability. All of those things are very critical in making, honestly, a very good golf club, right? Because our job is to make it fun for players to play golf. In order to do that, we've got objects that literally are seeing 7,000 Gs, and some environments that are even more stressful and strainful than what you see in space. And that research is very fundamental to being able to improve the durability, potentially the adhesion characteristics of multi-materials, the structural integrity of the surface. So ultimately, we'll get a very fundamental understanding of how the microgravity environment could improve a process that we use in making a golf club.
All right. Thank you. Gene, the Techshot bone densitometer has real interesting applications as well. Can you tell us a little bit about a little bit more about it?
Absolutely. So we've known for over 40 years that you lose bone density in space, but we've never been able to measure it in real time. So this is going to provide a platform finally that's going to allow researchers to measure that bone loss in real time in collaboration with some outstanding researchers, both in the commercial as well as in the academic research fields. And as a long-standing development or for NASA for hardware, and since CASIS's start, we've been an implementation partner for CASIS for developing hardware that we feel that our ability to develop world-class hardware for world-class researchers has really kind of hit, and we feel that this being our first piece to the International Space Station kind of really puts a high water mark for Techshot and for some research moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Jason, for Novartis, this is part of a potentially ongoing investigation, and wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about the role of Novartis.
Sure. So I work for Novartis Institute of Biomedical Research in the Kadena lab, and for us, it's all about muscle. That's what we're concerned with, muscle mass and muscle function, and more specifically preserving muscle mass and muscle function. So we've got this great opportunity to send an experiment into a unique environment where, because of the microgravity, muscle mass is directly affected. So what we'll be doing is sending control samples up with normal functioning proteins, and then sending up a knockout sample that has MRF protein knocked out and not functioning. Now, MRF is really cool. It's a muscle ring finger protein, and it labels other proteins for degradation and destruction. So when MRF is active in a muscle that's in an environment that is set up to get smaller, that's what MRF does. It labels proteins and they get destroyed. So what we're really hoping to see is, in the knockouts, situation where the muscle is actually spared from this atrophy in space. Now, why is muscle important? Well, unfortunately, we're all getting older, and once you reach about 65, naturally muscle mass starts to decline. This is also made worse by sickness, things like cancer, cachexia, or bed rest. So for us, maintaining a person's muscle mass is really important in these situations, because it will lead to a better quality of life and maybe a faster recovery. So we're really looking forward to this exciting opportunity to explore different methods and mechanisms behind muscle loss and how this could potentially help patients in the future.
Okay. Nikki, the idea of 3D printing has really captivated many of us, and the idea of sending it up to the International Space Station seems to have all kinds of potential. I know that this is sort of a demonstration the first time around, but can you elaborate a little bit on the technology? And I know you have a demonstration model with you and some of the tools as well. If you could just share some information with us, we would appreciate it.
Absolutely, I would love to. Actually, 3D printing has captivated me as well. It's especially important when we consider space travel, human space exploration. From day one, the supply chain has been very constrained. As you know, we have to launch every single thing that we ever need from Earth. So being able to make what you need on orbit when you need it is a real game changer. So our first, this is our baby, this is our 3D printer technology demonstration, and it is a partnership between NASA and the company Made in Space, Inc. It's through a Small Business Innovation and Research Award, and it's, in my opinion, been a very ideal collaboration between NASA and a small business. The first printer that we're flying is actually a technology demonstration, and it's that simply because the space station is literally the only platform in the universe where we can print an entire part in microgravity, parabolic, or the affectionately known vomit comet flights, where we've gotten a lot of data that shows that the parts are equitable to those that we print on the ground. However, you can really only get 20 to 30 second spurts of microgravity on those flights. So being able to print an entire part, which even our smaller parts may take 15 to 20 minutes, Space Station is our only avenue for doing that. That's why we call it a technology demonstration. So the first phase will focus on the printer and the process, but the second phase we do focus more on demonstrating the actual parts we print and their usefulness on Space Station for things like, obviously, science users, science experiments, and consumable laboratory equipment, as well as crew tools. We're working closely with the crew tools office, even small satellite components. Really, the possibilities are endless. And what I get most excited about are the things that we haven't even thought of yet. Because now when you can design a part to be printed in microgravity, you don't have to worry about things like launch loads anymore, which that has been so beaten into us from day one to design for surviving the environment of launch. So I think it's really going to open up that design space and the possibilities. And I think when we get that call, that first call for the part that none of us even really even thought of out of all the brainstorming we've done, I think that's going to be a very exciting day.
Okay, for questions, please feel free to raise your hands, and we'll get a microphone to you since we're on TV, and we want everybody to be able to participate. Marcia Dunn?
Marcia Dunn, Associated Press, on the printer. How is the piece going up into space different from what we see on the ground? How did you have to make it safe for the astronauts to use? And talk a little bit about how often it'll be used and how they're going to use it.
Right, so I'll take the first question first. And as far as how the actual 3D printing process works and the extrusion of the plastic, it is actually very analogous to what we do on the ground. What you hit it head on with what we really had to think about and work with Made in Space is the safety design, the design for easy operations and autonomy. Obviously, surviving launch loads and going through the stringent flight certification process. On the ground, for example, if you have to align your 3D printer, you have to turn like thumb screws and visually align that. That's very difficult in microgravity, and we don't want to use crew time for that. So we don't have to worry about that on this printer. It's been designed where the structure itself compensates. We do have a backup way for doing that, but it is a backup. Also, the parts that we know will eventually wear out and have to be exchanged, we've made those very modular. Made in Space has worked hard to design that. We worked very closely, NASA and Made in Space, throughout the design process to ensure that when we went through the flight certification and the operations and the safety process, that the design did pass. And through the very first run of safety and flight cert, it passed successfully, which for a brand new technology and brand new hardware is challenging. So we're very proud of that. Also that autonomy, so we'll be able to uplink the files from the successfully, which for a brand new technology and brand new hardware is challenging. So we're very proud of that. Also that autonomy, so we'll be able to uplink the files from the ground directly to the printer. Made in Space has ground directly to the printer. Made in Space has a laptop they can command from their offices in California, as well as we can command from the control center in Huntsville, Alabama, directly to the printer. So you can imagine how cool it will be when we're able to uplink or email a part to space instead of launching it. It's really a game changer.
Can I just follow up? So everything is enclosed, though, is right? This is always going to be sealed during operation?
Actually, this front door, you can move the front door to remove the part, remove the print. The little print tray just slides out and the crew removes it. And the setup and the part remover are the only things that the crew has to do. We're able to control the print. And you'll notice the windows as well on the front and the side will have high definition cameras, and we'll be watching live from the ground. So that will provide immediate data feedback. We'll be able to see in very detailed visuals how the plastic is being deposited layer by layer, which will give us some immediate science feedback. In addition, the very first parts that we print, they may not look really exciting to the layman, but they're exciting to us. We'll be doing all kinds of coupons, tensile, flexure, compression. Those very first parts we will also return to the ground and do detailed ground analysis and compare to the ground controls. But yes, while it's being printed, it remains sealed, and then when done, the crew just pops open that door, removes the print tray and removes the part, and then we can start all over.
I'd like to add just a little bit to that. Marcia, CASIS is actually very, very interested in what NASA is doing with this demonstration portion of this. We're hoping at the same time to maybe be able to parallel with some of their efforts of ensuring that in fact you can additive manufacture in space and then actually print parts. We're also hopeful that we can start to look at how our customers may benefit from this as well. And we've noticed quickly there's really twofold opportunity here. Through the safety processes and some of the technology design that was necessarily inherent in order for this to be manifested for flight, there's actually applications that have been derived that can be applicable to the additive manufacturing process globally and on the ground. And some of those things are still under consideration and development. But from our perspective, if you consider CASIS first and foremost the supporter of an R&D laboratory where in general science is being conducted, there's really two things that are pretty much a given principle in any type of science that you're doing. One is that it's an iterative process, and two, you go through consumables. It takes materials in order to conduct a series of experiments. And by creating an additive manufacturing facility on orbit in our laboratory, that in essence is a huge game changer for us, because now we no longer have to wait for the next transportation opportunity up to space. We know that science is iterative. We know that for every question that's answered, there are probably 5 new questions that are generated. So to be able to continue the research without having to worry about the transportation logistics and consumables is a huge opportunity for us as well as NASA. So we're very excited to be able to partner with them on this in the very near future.
As well, I should have mentioned, after this technology demonstration, we will follow with a even more sophisticated printer that will be a commercial printer that Made in Space has designed. NASA will become a customer of that printer. So that a lot of work will take place through CASIS, as well as from a NASA perspective. For exploration missions, the supply model that we use currently is just not feasible. So we're very interested in continuing to evolve this technology, eventually having an integrated suite of capabilities, from everything from additive or printable electronics to larger structures, additive construction, where you could even use the in situ resources somewhere like Mars to build radiation shielding habitats or landing pads. So everything from the smallest tool to the habitat you live in eventually for exploration, and everything you might need along the way, we hope to establish through the In-Space Manufacturing Initiative.
Ken Kramer?
Hi, Ken Kramer, Universe Today and America Space. 2 questions. Let me just follow up on the 3D printing. Are these examples of what you are going to be printing in space?
Some of them are, and some of them are just for fun. But yes, we definitely, we're developing a utilization catalog that we'll be really focusing on. I mentioned that phase 1 of the printer is to focus on the printer and the process. Phase 2 turns to focus on the parts. So we're working with payload developers, we're working with the science community and the crew tools, logistics and maintenance, medical offices, replacement hardware for exercise equipment, and we've got placeholders in the catalog to explore all of those. I will say the key to this, though, is we want to be successful in understanding the foundation of the materials and their in design optimization using additive manufacturing is really key to the success of this, as much or more than even the actual technology of the printer itself. So in conjunction, we're also developing the material databases, which I know doesn't sound as exciting and thrilling, but it really is. And knowing how to design the parts where they function appropriately is important. So when we design a wrench, for example, it may not look like the wrench that you get at your local supply store. It may be shorter and squatter and fatter, but it will do its job.
Okay, my other question is for Techshot. Please, can you tell us a little bit more details? You mentioned you're going to be collecting the data in real time. Will you be transmitting it and receiving this data in real time? How many astronauts are involved, and how regular will you be making these measurements? Thanks.
So yes, the information can be downlinked. So it's being collected on the Express Rack laptop and can be downlinked in real time to researchers, and it's really up to the science community as to how often. Since right now we are the hardware developer, we're not the science end user, so that's going to be determined by people like Novartis, who are going to be using the hardware. So I can't necessarily answer the science question to how often the hardware is going to be used, but it's going to be a permanent installation. So there
must be some regular use of it, right?
Yeah, there is. It's being part of AIM's rodent research plan, and again, a scan for the hardware is approximately 3 minutes and can be used virtually indefinitely. So it's being planned for every launch from here to the expected endpoint of the station. So we're planning fairly regular usage, periodic usage throughout the life. So I would say at least weekly to monthly usage.
I'd add to that, this is really a new model that Techshot along with some of the other implementation partners over the recent past, are sort of delving into. And that is, they are providing a service on orbit that can be obtained by any end customer. And as Nikki pointed out with respect to 3D printing, both NASA and CASIS will ultimately be customers of the service that they can provide. We really challenged Techshot to determine if can you take a commercially available off-the-shelf piece of analytical equipment, obviously harden it and make it safe for ISS utilization, but still keep it functionally as similar as possible to what our researchers on the ground are used to. I think they really nailed all those requirements in doing so. And I can't emphasize enough that using Novartis as an example, we know that microgravity really has a lot of opportunities in biomedical research in those areas, primarily the area of bone loss and bone demineralization, as well as muscle wasting or atrophy, are probably the ones that really bubble to the top as wanting to understand better the fundamental aspects of those observations of microgravity, but more specifically how we apply those to therapeutics and perhaps even drug therapies. So being able to actually analyze bone loss in real time in the laboratory without having to account for return to space and G-loads and how that may impact your sample is again another game changer for us, and it's huge. And there's a lot of interest in the pharmaceutical areas that would like to continue to use this going on in the future. But as with any new technology, there is a period of sort of demonstration. That's what really this first element of this mission will be, but we expect to be using it quite a bit.
Right here in the front row.
Matt Coons from social media for 3D printing. From an engineering perspective, what material are you starting with, and what sort of property changes do you expect to see?
So the material that we're starting with for the technology demonstration is ABS plastic, which is the same plastic that the Lego bricks are made out of. So as you probably know, we've flown quite a bit of ABS through Legos and through other parts. Some of the CubeSat components and structures have been ABS. The next printer, we're looking at even stronger, higher temperature plastics. There's several that we've been doing detailed ground studies on. The ABS, there's still several things that we've been looking at that it will work quite well with, and we're doing detailed ground studies and analysis. As far as what will be different in microgravity, there's no way to say different in microgravity. There's no way to say for certainty. I think that's probably the most exciting part about this, is that we can't say with 100% certainty if it's going to be the same. The parabolic flights have led us to believe, and we feel confident that it will be, but we won't know that for sure until we get those first samples back.
Yeah, James Stoughton with Spaceflight Insider. Obviously, Techshot, the hardware is getting delivered now, and you're testing. Do you know when the first live specimen, the small rodents or whatnot, will be set up to station for the testing?
Yeah, so the bone densitometer is part of a much larger project that both NASA and CASIS are collaborating on. And there will be more discussion, I think, later this afternoon in another briefing on some of the model organisms that will be used. But I think a general statement would be that on this flight will be not only the delivery of the densitometer, but also the organisms. I believe the Novartis study for CASIS and some of the NASA studies require a 20 to 30-day period of microgravity exposure. And then at that point, there will be the endpoint analyses that will take place, which at that point, that's when the densitometer will be used, among a few other things.
Okay, and in the back over here.
Yes, good morning. Chiro Villa from social media. I also kind of had a question on the same line with kind of interested in the bone density studies that are going to be performed, and kind of was interested if you could elaborate a little bit more of how the handshake takes place between what you learn in space and then how do you actually go and apply on Earth what you're going to be learning in space, how that process of transfer takes place.
Well, that's a great question. Let me try to kind of generally answer that. The one thing to really emphasize is that the ISS is, now that it's open and completely available for science utilization, really marks an opportunity for multi-durational studies in microgravity take place. Yes, there have been organism studies with respect to microgravity exposure and how that impacts bone loss, how that impacts muscle wasting in the past. But if you'll recall, at the most, those exposures were as long as a shuttle sortie was. So this really marks the first time that we can go many days, many weeks, and perhaps out into months to really clearly understand what are the impacts, how does microgravity provide an ideal platform for understanding these physiological consequences. So we're probably still on the very front leading edge of answering some of the basic questions that will lead to application. However, at the same time, you have companies like Novartis and other commercial pharmaceutical interests that see this as opportunistic. One, because a lot of the basic science hasn't been answered, and if they can sort of have the first in look at it, if you will, and perhaps create intellectual property or other information that may be of use to them, that helps them get to market sooner. So how does the handshake take place? CASIS tries to make it as simple as possible. So we have entered into a user agreement with Novartis. For this portion of the research, we have helped them with funding, so they've provided a lot of their cash as well as in-kind support. We've helped with a little bit of funding, but from that partnership, we're basically opening the national laboratory for use. So they can come in, they'll conduct the research, they'll go home and complete their post-flight analytics, if you will, and from that, they now have ownership of the intellectual property and the data that they've created.
And if I can expand just a little bit on that, Dwayne, from kind of a nuts and bolts perspective, when CASIS and NASA approached Techshot and kind of challenged us to do this, we kind of scoured the research arena, and we found what was state-of-the-art, and we have the same software platform. So, you know, what was state-of-the-art for ground research for looking at bone loss and muscle loss in the laboratory that these the top researchers in the country were using, they're going to see the exact same result, the exact same screens, the exact same user interface on station with the results that they're seeing in their laboratory. So they're going to be able to make one-to-one comparisons. That was critical to us to be able to present that to the user community. So they're not going to have to learn a new user interface and anything else. So we wanted to make sure that looked seamless, whether it was on station or in their laboratory.
I have a question too. Just in general, Dwayne, if you step back and you look at the diverse amount of payloads that we're talking about today, and really neat things. As far as the development of the International Space Station and the national lab portion and what CASIS is doing, where do you really see the payload market, moving? Where do you see things, successful in the near term and in the far term, I guess?
That's a really great question, and I will say that within the 3 years that we've been operating, and clearly not ignoring all the work that has been done within NASA and research over many decades, there are 3 areas that seem to really sort of become emerging where there is a true value being described with respect to this being an ideal research platform. And I'll say we've been able to demonstrate this since we started operations ourselves. We've issued over $10 million in grants in areas of research, and we've manifested 115 payloads as national lab payloads. In those areas, biomedical research and biotech analysis development seem to be really the biggest emerging market or vertical, and we have obviously placed a lot of focus on continuing to demonstrate that so that we will now have an application going forward. Second to that, though, interestingly enough, Mike and Cobra Puma Golf represent the area of materials science that largely is not well understood, nor has it been capitalized with respect to how do the physical aspects of microgravity impact materials from design, duration, sustainment, and ultimately impact here on the ground. Cobra Puma Golf is a great example of that, but there's a lot of other companies that are also interested in materials research for the sake of application and development for product in the future. The third area actually kind of goes outside, and it looks at the ISS as a unique observation platform for Earth sensing and observation. And when you compare that to, say, geosynchronous satellites, which largely are what we rely on for Earth observation and sensing and communication and what have you, ISS has advantages. It's not a 100% solution to a lot of things, but it certainly is a lot easier to get to. And a lot more affordable to get to, thanks to the CASIS model and the cooperative agreement that we have with NASA. So I think over the next 18 to 24 months, we'll see a lot increased interest in the Earth sensing and remote observations opportunities as well.
Okay, thank you. We had a question in the front row here.
Yes, Aaron Hayworth from Spaceflight Insider. This is a question for Mike Yagley. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about sort of what materials research you're planning, and I guess what benefits we're going to see back here on Earth from what the research you're doing is going to pay off in.
Yes. So the materials themselves, it's an aluminum substructure and then a silver electroplating over top of it. And the experiment is to understand the impact of microgravity on the crystalline growth of the material that's being deposited, that'd be the silver, and then the subsequent durability improvement, structural improvement that can be gained from that. And from a structural standpoint, you have the improvement of the actual plating that's put on the material itself, and then there's so that'd be durability of that plating, the durability of the structure, the improvement or potential enhancement of joining to similar materials, because there's plating and or other prepping processes that need to be done in order to join things like titanium to carbon composite or titanium to steel. So in a golf club, you've got a very complex structure that undergoes a ton of loads. I was shocked when I got in the industry, because I came from aerospace and thinking, in golf, how much science is there in golf? And I was shocked at how many rocket scientists, how many engineers, how many technicians, how many material scientists are dedicating their work to, making better structures. Happens to be a golf club. It's pretty serious science. I was very impressed. So those all could potentially be enhanced. Durability, structural, also potentially galvanic corrosion could be prevented, because you've got dissimilar materials that are joined, and you need to have a good barrier between some of those dissimilar materials. So all of that would apply to, of course, the golf clubs that we're looking at, and any other structures that are built that way. I mean, things that are put in space are built with similar materials and have similar challenges in terms of the manufacturing and the assembly and the use of those structures. Automobiles, airplanes. I mean, there's a lot of commonality between the materials and structures in a golf club and many other things in life. So, and I would also point to the rapid prototyping that's being done. At some point, somebody's going to want to put either a plating on top of that for connectivity, right, or structural improvement or durability. So being able to plate in space in a microgravity environment is going to be important for those rapid prototype pieces that are made. They won't be rapid prototypes at that point. They're going to be things that we use in space. So the enhancement of that product will be critical also. So there's many applications for it. Thanks.
James?
James Dean, Florida Today. So thank you for explaining kind of the science elements of the golf club, which was part of my question. But Dwayne, I was curious if, on your end, was there any concern at all about perception that, working on a golf club wouldn't necessarily be the most serious use of a $100 billion laboratory? Or on the flip side, is this maybe like one of the best opportunities yet to wake up the average person to the fact that we even have a space station? And Mike, I was curious, whatever you do or don't learn up there, will it be valuable to you guys? Do you intend to use, from a marketing standpoint, the fact that you've been in space and done this kind of work up on the space station? Is that something where you guys expect to generate, commercial value just by being up there?
So I honestly, I'm hoping that whatever comes out of this will straighten out my slice. So I guess I'm a little biased in the research.
Can't make that promise.
Yeah. But no, first and foremost, I think the way we need to look at this is not research on a golf club. This is industrial research and development on materials that is clearly targeted for the improvement of products that will go into the marketplace. And honestly, this is one example, probably one of the best examples to date that I can think of, really illustrates the mission of CASIS. And that is looking at how R&D in a national laboratory has terrestrial impact direct. There's no questions about it. What they're doing, they are spending their own capital and their own money to do industrial research and development that will tie into their product enhancement and will need to be sold on the marketplace. This is a for-profit company, and we're really excited that this research may translate into a product. Maybe it will be a golf club, maybe it'll be something else. But yeah, James, you're absolutely right. This is also a great opportunity for us as part of our other mission within CASIS to conduct the outreach and advocacy and awareness of the ISS and the ISS National Laboratory. And what better story to tell that there is a recreational company who is investing their own R&D dollars in hopes of improving their products. And yes, we will probably both capitalize on the brand that may be created as a secondary result of the significant research that's taken place.
Yeah. And your question on marketing, I can tell you we've got in our building probably 30 to 40 people totally dedicated to, you know, the science and the manufacturing, the engineering, the design of the product, and you've got a handful of marketing people, and they've got to figure out at times how to make what we do more interesting. I mean, it's very interesting to engineers and scientists, right? We love what we're doing. The average golfer, it might escape them a little bit because, like Dwayne said, he just wants to reduce the slice. Well, there's a ton of science that goes into doing that. And so when the marketing people see it and they say, so we'll actually be able to say we've done some research that was significant. And again, I'm going to emphasize it's research, right? That's the whole point of this. It is research. We don't know if we're going to see an improvement, a degradation. We're assuming, not assuming, we know we'll see a change. The hypothesis we'll see is we'll see an improvement. And back to the marketing guys, you know, being able to say, hey, we did some research that we couldn't do here on Earth that help us make a better material that happens to be used in a golf club. You know, they can't think of anything better in order to, you know, excite someone and get them interested into something that, you know, it looks like, you know, it's a metal object sitting there, right? There's so much science that goes into it, and our job is to, you know, make it a great golf club, and then some people have to, you know, talk about it and get people interested in it. So they're highly interested in leveraging the made in space portion of this.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think we actually want to capitalize on the brand awareness that this can create, again, for our own personal interest, which is creating awareness of the ISS, but also promoting what can come from utilization of the ISS. And so CASIS has invested in trademarking a brand, which is Spaces In, as Mike mentions, and we're hopeful that as a result of this research and ultimately that technology being deployed into a product that's sold on the market, that brand will be a part of that, and that we will capitalize on that as well.
Ken, did you have another question?
Yeah, hi, Ken Kramer for America Space. For Novartis, I'm wondering is this your first experiment on the ISS, or do you have others? What are your plans for the future? And your research will help not just people on the ground, but do you expect it to have applicability to the astronauts and perhaps long-duration space flight? Thanks.
Absolutely. So this is my first involvement in an experiment. I can't speak to whether or not we've conducted others, but for our muscle group, this is absolutely the first one for us. And in terms of applications for space travel, I think we're really excited about the opportunity to be in an environment where muscle atrophy occurs. I spend a lot of my time in the lab creating artificially muscle atrophy. So to be able to get data from a research station that happens naturally, it's very exciting for us because it will really lead to some sort of future understandings that maybe perhaps through our artificial creation on Earth we don't necessarily catch or observe. But I do see sort of not just a patient benefit on Earth, but for long-term manned space flight, it's definitely going to be something that, you know, muscle loss and bone loss will definitely need to be something that's addressed. And hopefully, you know, this is the first step in starting to answer some of those questions.
Marcia?
Associated Press with a golf and a printer question. Could you explain what are the samples that you're flying? How big are they? How many? And do they come back on this Dragon? And the same for the printer. How long will your printer stay up, and when does the next version go up?
So the parts that we're going to fly will be, there'll be 20 of them, and they're roughly about, say 50 millimeters in diameter, about 10 millimeters tall. And they'll be in 2 separate experiments. So we're doing 2 separate plating durations, and those parts will be coming down on a subsequent flight. They will not come back on the same capsule. They'll come back on a subsequent flight.
For the 3D printer, we have no plans actually to return the printer itself. For the first initial parts, it is absolutely time critical that we get those back as soon as possible. And the reason why is, I mentioned earlier, those very first initial coupons, even though we'll get some preliminary feedback from the video, we really need to test those on the ground and compare them to the ground controls, and we have a test matrix for doing just that. The sooner we get those back, we can close out the final design of the additive manufacturing facility, the commercial facility that will follow. So we're hoping to get those back on the first available flight home. SpaceX 5 would probably be the first opportunity. As far as the printer, even when we get the commercial printer up, we're looking at the possibility of leaving the tech demo on orbit, because we'll want to continue testing other materials. Maybe we might tweak the way we handle some of our operations or some of our modularity. We're looking at ways to do in-space metals. We're also looking at ways that we can use a Regulus simulant, lunar or Martian simulant, to 3D print. And just like with the plastic, there's no other place to do that besides space station. So continue demonstrating different technologies would be ideal in parallel with the commercial printer.
I mean, when do you think is the earliest that you're...
For the next version of the printer, 2015 is the goal, mid to late. Obviously, we still have to go through the same flight certification. Made in Space will be going through the same flight certification and safety protocol that they did with this printer.
Okay. We have time for one final question here in the front.
Hey, this is Megan Gannon with Space.com. I just have a follow-up question about the 3D printing. So when the coupons come back to the ground, how will you test them? What kinds of changes are you going to look for?
So we actually have a B-basis test matrix. We use the ASTM standards, and we have our ground controls that were printed on the exact same printer before flight. So we have our additive manufacturing facility there at Marshall Space Flight Center, the labs. They've actually been doing this since about 1999, when our principal investigator, Ken Cooper, first flew a parabolic flight. So they have a very detailed protocol and test matrix. But it's the things that you might imagine to see if there are any material characterization changes. We're particularly interested in the mechanical properties, obviously, to be able to use this material for various utilization capabilities of tools and parts.
Dwayne, do you or anyone else on the panel have any closing remarks before we...
Yeah, we have been waiting for this flight for quite some time, and we're very excited for SpaceX 4. As I mentioned when we opened up this morning actually, this panel actually represents the diversity of the research that we have going on. But I'll also mention very quickly that in support of our earlier mission on SpaceX 3, where we delivered 6 protein crystallization experiments, we have 2 additional ones that will be delivered on this flight. One is with the Broad Institute out of MIT. They are working on a new platform that has been developed by NanoRacks and Emerald Bio. Again, it represents commercially available, off-the-shelf, state-of-the-art technology that's used in ground labs, and we're looking to conduct some proprietary protein crystal studies on that. We also have a follow-on study from one of our original investigators, and when SpaceX 4 returns, we have 3 of our customers coming back from that SpaceX 3 launch. We also have the Veterans Administration as a customer, looking at some drug studies on model organisms, and so that is part of our other government agency support that we are also under the cooperative agreement we're required to support. So we have a lot of opportunities going up on this one. We're really excited for it, so we can't wait for launch on Saturday.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. I think you can see everybody is excited. We also have a video that we're going to play when we're done here that talks a little bit more about cases and some of the experiments and investigations that you brought forth. So we look forward to that as well. Coming up at 11 o'clock, we'll have a briefing today on model organisms, and you can keep track of all of the research and everything that's leading toward the launch of the SpaceX CRS-4 launch, which currently is slated for 2:14 a.m. on Saturday, by going to the web at www.nasa.gov/SpaceX. Thank you very much.